Now, on the topic of home theater, this surround sound hobby that we love so much, the question that I love to ask you today is one subwoofer good enough? That's the $1,000,000 question. All right. Now, if you're happening on this channel for the first time, my name is Owen, and this is where I sit and we just talk about the hobby of home theater, 2-channel audio, and all of that. Not much in terms of specs and all of that. We just love to, to discuss the hobby and, pick each other's brains, so to speak. Yeah, so like I said, if you're into home theater, I have been in home theater for about 20, 25 years. And, over that period of time, I've always had even a basic 5.1 system. And the question that I want to ask you today is one sub good enough? Now, if you're new to the home theater space here, I'm not going to assume that you know what a subwoofer is. So, for those of you who are new, let me kind of break it down a little bit. Now, a subwoofer is basically a speaker that is placed somewhere in your listening room. Usually, it's sitting in a corner somewhere, on the floor. Not that other speakers are not on the floor. That's not what I'm driving at. But essentially, it's a bass speaker. It's the basic function of a subwoofer is to reproduce low frequencies, right? So when you go to the movies, when you're in a movie theater and you can hear all the effects in terms of, the rumble and the bass, and, say for example, an aircraft should drop a bomb, I don't even want to use the terminology for bomb, because that kind of conjure up certain scenes that I don't want to think about. But nevertheless, I digress. The basic purpose of the subwoofer is to reproduce low frequencies. So bass, if it's music, the bass. If it's a home theater, the heavy effects, the explosions, the crashes, the oomph, if you know what I'm talking about. All right. And, if you have a home theater system, a basic 5.1 system, that 0.1 refers to the bass speaker or the subwoofer, right? And that speaker would be placed in a corner or anywhere for that matter where it can reproduce, those kind of heavy bass, dynamic effects, right? Yeah. When your house start to rumble, when the theater, we go to the cinema and the place start to shake, those are the speakers that are recreating that kind of effect. You understand? Depending on the kind of movie that is being shown or, you're watching on your TV. Right? So that's the purpose of the subwoofer. And, for the most part, one is generally all you need. For the most part, one is usually enough. For many years, I was doing just one sub, and it was adequate, but through the years, as the technology has evolved, as, the hobby of home theater has taken on a different life, so to speak, and then you start to see receivers, the receiver is the heart of the home theater now, the receivers coming with like dual sub out, then, the conversation started to change somewhat. People are running dual subs, one over there and one over there, right? And, so some people, would be running multiple subs in their system. And part of the reasoning behind that is that, when you do a dual sub kind of layout, a dual, not even, I mean, you can have more than two. You can have as much as you want. But let's talk about two subs now. The reasoning behind that is that you can kind of even out the bass or the effects more better in your listening space. What I mean is that for the most part, bass frequencies are not easily identified. What I mean is that whenever you have a subwoofer in your system, in your home theater system, if someone should walk into your home theater, it should not be easily identified. The location of your sub should not be easily detectable, if you know what I mean. Because for the most part, bass frequencies are kind of more non-directional, so to speak. But for me, sometimes I can still locate where my bass is coming from. I don't know if it's just a mental thing because I know where the subwoofer is placed on the floor. But generally speaking, one should not be able to detect easily where the bass speaker is placed in the room, right? The bass should fill out the room very evenly. And so one way of getting around that, or should I say one way of, getting your bass to be more even in your listening space would be to run dual subwoofers. And, one way to do that would be to kind of set them up in a kind of a diagonal placement, kind of a diagonal placement, not necessarily front to back, but setting them up in opposite corners of say your listening space in a diagonal kind of way, right? And once you have your levels kind of calibrated properly, then the bass should sound a little bit more even. The bass should disperse a little bit better in this space. And if someone should walk into your space, they should not be able to easily identify the placement or the location of your sub. All right? So that's kind of the logic behind running two or more subwoofers in your home theater, right? So, but I come back to the question though, while all of that has its benefits and and all of that, is one sub good enough? That's the question of the day. But I think it all going to comes down to quite a few factors, quite a few determining factors to kind of make you decide whether or not you're going to run two subs, right? If you want to. And some of those factors are, for example, how much bass do you want? How much bass do you want? If it's, if you set up something in your living room and you have just a small living room, maybe one subwoofer is good enough, and you may put two, and then it just did not meet the wife acceptance factor, so to speak. Big up Techno Dad. I think he's the one who coined that phrase. But what I'm trying to say, will your spouse approve of, having dual subs in such a small space? You may love it, but like they say, happy wife, happy life. Yeah, so it comes back to it comes back to the question: how much bass do you want? The second and the second thing, which I kind of alluded to earlier, is how big is your listening space? How big is the space where you have your home theater set up? How big is the space? That is something that has to be taken into consideration, right? The other one of the other determining factor could be how big are your subwoofers? How big are they the ginormous subs? Do you have a ginormous sub already and you want to add another ginormous sub, or you just have maybe something, maybe a small cube thing, so it all comes down to that, which could be another determining factor. How what is size of the subs you want to implement into the system, right? And I think one of the most important determining factor also is how many sub outs does your home theater receiver have. All right. I have not purchased a new receiver in quite a while now, but for the most part, most of them would, okay, let's back up a little bit. The minimum sub out is one, right? One subwoofer out. That's the minimum. But on the more modern receivers, most of them are coming with two, right? So like I said, I haven't purchased a new receiver in a while, so I'm not sure if receivers are coming with more than two subwoofer outs at this time, right? As I'm recording this video, it is September 2025, so I don't know where the technology has gone to in terms of subwoofer out on receivers. Let me know, right? So those are some of the determining factors, that would kind of help you to decide, whether or not you're going to run one or more subwoofers. How much bass do you want, right? How big is your space? What are the sizes of the sub you want to implement, and how many subwoofer out are on your receiver, right? Yeah, but I'm just going back. I'm just want to circle back to the question. Taking everything into consideration, where bass seem to be king these days. People really want to hear, the rumble, good, heavy effect as it relates to your home theater. You want to feel as if you're at the movies. I watch certain home theater enthusiasts online, and some of them are running some massive sub behind their screens. Obviously they have dedicated subwoofer space. They have dedicated home theater spaces, right? So they can do this, and they may have the wherewithal in terms of the finances to purchase these, to purchase multiple subs and implement them in their system. These are the more professional, high-end home theaters, right? And so you'll find many of these more bigger enthusiasts, they would be running multiple subs, many behind their screens, their projection screens and all of that, and maybe some around the room. So it all depends on what you want and what you can afford, and that is where the trend seemed to be going, or should I say the trend have gone over the last maybe 2 or 3 years. Multiple subs, bigger subs, for better effects, right? But what about you? What about us who may not be, maybe all we can afford is just one sub. Are you feeling as if you're being left out? Are you feeling, as if you are, you're not, your system is not up to par? Or perhaps you're just running one sub and in your mind that is quite adequate. In my little home theater setup in here right now, I'm just running one sub. To be very candid with you, to be very open, I own 3 subs. I use one for my home theater, I use one for my 2-channel setup, and I have a little spare, just a small one, sitting around somewhere around here, But if I should ever own another, receiver which has dual sub out, I may go back to a dual subwoofer setup. And another video I'm going to make as it relates to subwoofer is how you can, if you have just one subwoofer out on your home theater receiver, how can you implement 2 subs if you have just one out? That's an upcoming video. Stay tuned for that. But let's just circle back to the question. Is one subwoofer good enough for you? What are you rocking? Tell me about it. Are you running dual subs? Are you running multiple subs? Or are you just running one single sub? I love to hear about it. All right? So, until we meet again, if you love this video where we just sit and we just, ramble along, or we just, however you want to describe it, we talk about home theater, the hobby of home theater and 2-channel audio, because this is what the channel is all about, and it's all about giving you tips and sharing ideas and, bouncing ideas back and forth. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, and if you love the channel, don't forget to subscribe. All right, so until the next video, guys, you take care of yourselves now, and be good. All right, bye bye.